Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. As we get a little bit closer to Halloween, I'm going to be doing the second part of a three-part series. I'll be talking about Hammer Studios' 1957 release, Curse of Frankenstein. Like I said, it's a part two of a three-part series I'm doing on the best of the Frankenstein movies. This film came out in 1957. It stars Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein and Christopher Lee as his creation. It is a loose adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel. They take a lot of liberties, but it's a wonderful movie. I absolutely love this film. Uh, Basic story, Dr. Frankenstein is determined, will stop at nothing to achieve his goal, which is to reanimate a corpse, which he is going to build himself from the parts of other bodies. He is so determined to reach his goal that he pretty much alienates everybody in his life, even his best friend and science colleague, Paul, who has worked with him for years. He can see that Frankenstein's obsession is healthy and unnatural, and when he tries to confront him, Dr. Frankenstein gets irate and basically kicks him out. Continues the project on his own. Through his extreme measures, he manages to do just exactly what he set out to do. He gathers body parts from various corpses and creates a very grotesque creation. The monster, like I said, is played by Christopher Lee. I love the look of Frankenstein's monster in this movie. I love it. It's Boris Karloff's monster in the original was awesome, but I just think this is more realistic, more natural looking. It's an awesome makeup job. Christopher Lee really does a great job of playing the monster. He is very terrifying in some scenes. Other scenes, he is very emotional with the character and is actually able to get the viewer to feel sympathy for the monster. Things don't go the way Frankenstein had hoped. The monster rebels against him, escapes, and runs amok through the countryside until it's brought down by Frankenstein himself by shooting the monster through the eye, which causes severe brain damage. So that the second time he brings the monster back to life, it's much more docile and calm, but also more easily manipulated and open to suggestion. And that's where we get into a subplot where the housekeeper for the Frankenstein family, or for Dr. Frankenstein, he's engaged, of course, to marry Elizabeth. And he has a housekeeper who he has secretly been having an affair with. She threatens to tell Elizabeth if Frankenstein doesn't break it off with her and marry her instead, she's going to tell Elizabeth everything that's going on. So Frankenstein locks her in a room with the monster and has the monster murder her, and he disposes of the body. And then a little later in the film, I forget, I don't forget. I'm going to not fill in all the details here because I don't want to ruin the whole film for you, but the monster goes after Frankenstein's wife, or, well, yeah, I believe at this point they have gotten married. He goes after Elizabeth, and the monster ends up getting, Frankenstein ends up having to destroy the monster. Unfortunately, the body of the maid is discovered, as well as what he's been doing, and Frankenstein is put on trial and convicted for crimes against humanity. And as the film ends, we see him in his prison cell, and we discover that the whole time that's been Frankenstein telling the story, kind of his last testament, so to speak. He's talking to a priest, and the movie ends with him being led to the gallows. This is a great movie. I absolutely love it. It was the first pairing by Hammer Studios of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing together, and they would go on to make a tremendous team throughout the next decade and a half, doing countless horror films for Hammer Studios. This movie springboarded both of their careers. It was the first venture into Gothic horror by Hammer Studios. And then the following year in 1958, with the release of Dracula, or Horror of Dracula, with Christopher Lee in the title role, Hammer Studio was cemented as the premier horror studio and would remain that way for nearly 20 years. So this movie really put Hammer on Curse of Frankenstein really put Hammer on the map and really established them as helped establish them as the leading horror film studio in the entire world. If you haven't seen The Curse of Frankenstein, I strongly suggest that you look it up. If you can find it on Blu-ray or DVD, or look for it on your favorite streaming service. I'm sure it's actually available on multiple streaming services. It's a wonderful film. It's like I said, a loose adaptation of Mary Shelley's book, but it is a wonderful, wonderful retelling of the Frankenstein story. Now, with that, I'm going to end this week's review, and join me back next week when I'll be doing part 3 of the 3-part series. I'll be wrapping up the best of the Frankenstein films. And until then, you all take care.